So, hi everyone, and welcome, and thanks for joining. I'm Leonhard Kugler. I'm from Center of Digital Sovereignty from Germany, and today I want to talk a bit about the public sector perspective in Germany on how to secure supply chain for open source software in the use of German government. And before I go deep into the technical part, I want a bit more give a frame introduction how our understanding of digital sovereignty is in case of the work we're doing. So for the work in the government strategies, the main criteria have been since years saying it's describes the abilities and the possibilities of us as individuals, but especially in public sector for the institutions, to be able to exercise a role in the digital world, and especially in terms of independency, self-determination, and security. So going with that definition, the German government took an approach, a strategic approach on digital sovereignty in Germany and funded the Center of Digital Sovereignty. In our work, our main definition of on our product and platform is talking about, in the first place, talking about having the possibility as public sector to choose between solutions in the market. It comes from the realization that if you are not able to choose between options or migrate between specific digital toolings, you are really dependent on what is part of your portfolio and have a low level of sovereignty. The second definition part is all around being able to adapt technology in case of terms for public sector and public sector infrastructure. That means mainly that we are able to implement cultural values, policies, and all around into the technologies we use for setting up government and digital infrastructure. And the third definition part is about having this voice and building the competence within public sector, negotiating and working with digital solutions in case of their portfolio and work. And all of that is core mission from ZenDiS. We're sitting in Bochum, which is some hour train ride from here. And our main mission is we empower public administration to emerge from those critical dependencies identified. So the way we're doing is on two layers. So the first one is all around working and identifying products that are needed on portfolios and where we can be able to procure them for our IT portfolios in fields where currently is a high level of dependency in the market. So two of the programs we're working with currently one is the OpenDesk, so a full office and collaboration suite integrated with open source components many years on the market. And the second one is around video and conferencing tooling, setting this up and bringing it in a rollout for public sector. And this all comes with platform infrastructure. This is mainly around the software development lifecycle and the main part where I want to talk today about. Maybe one note to OpenDesk, which I won't cover in my talk today. So, but there will be another talk tomorrow where you get a little bit more details on the current state of OpenDesk and how is it integrated in a full open operating system strategy in Germany. The part I want to talk today about is more about supply chain and what are the public sector perspective between how a software can be part of our IT portfolios. So in ZenDiS terms, we say the key to a secure and sovereign product like the OpenDesk is a secure and sovereign supply chain infrastructure. And that means on our terms, it's the OpenCode platform. And OpenCode was funded some years ago, 2022, generally in the beginning with the aim to bring together all the skills, services and solutions that are needed in the public sector to strengthen digital sovereignty through open source. And since that, the platform took a step-by-step evolution from being a software directory in the first place to now being a platform for digital sovereignty with much broader aspects on supply chains. Before I get more in the technology part of supply chains, I want to bring up the core idea why it was so needed, starting with a platform infrastructure in the first place. So the realization is there are so many digital solutions out there, open source and also proprietary, where you could raise the questions, okay, this could be something for a digital portfolio of governance as a platform. And the main question is, how do I get those solutions in a common use of public sector? And if you're coming from the fields or dealing with such projects, you often realize there's somehow a door where you're not really know how do I get through that. And many questions came up regarding the quality and the criteria of the solutions, which I need to face before I have a chance offering that for public sector. So these are all questions around quality and features, but also things we might not be day by day familiar with, public sector procurement processes and all around that. A lot of compliance rules that comes up, for sure security questions, but also how do I get a good support infrastructure, and how is it possible to, on a legal way, to cooperate and work with this software? Is this legally compliant with all of these terms? And because of all that questions, there was a realization there needs to be a place where especially software under public sector terms can be curated under those criteria and can be prepared for the usage in public sector. And then where it comes to OpenCode in the first place. And in the beginning, it was mainly about all around governance and collaboration. So bringing the sector in the expertise to deal with the solutions that are already there. So OpenCode in the first phase was building up a software director for all the open source solutions. What I realized when I joined the project OpenCode 1.5 years ago, there's so much public sector software written and under open source terms, but we don't really have a good culture of reusing it. So we somehow miss the point. But the technology is already there. And so having a curated software director was the first step into that. Also for public sector, it's good how to get it into governance in terms of criteria. In this terms, it means defining the open source criteria and the definition. For sure, we didn't invent that new. It's the OCI criteria, but written in a language and terms for public sector in Germany. And also a very important point is all about legal and licenses. So open source has an allow list of open source licenses, which we legally checked and marked as this is under the terms and the criteria for open source of the OCI is a solution that public sector can procure and proceed with. And then all around platform for collaboration and policy and governance advisors. So having this in place, we started with a platform where also from the beginning, everything was in, you need to develop software. Means it is an GitLab with sufficient CI/CD and resources to build your project. It's a lot around community and project organizations, and we collect all the knowledge that is needed to get and onboarded on those topics and terms. With having that in place, it was really fast clear, okay, we are now have a platform infrastructure that can be part of the whole software supply chain, and we can open up adding value to needed questions of software supply chain for public sector. before I get to the OpenCode point, I may give a brief overview. What does it mean in terms of software paradigm and how software was supplied through the decades of terms where we use software now. In the beginning, from the 80s, 90s, it was quite sufficient getting a CD, a DVD-ROM, where you have your software on and any updates and all this stuff. So the supply chain was a very slow process. It was slow troubleshooting, but also not a strong visibility of the quality and the state of your software you're using in that term. And this migrated step by step. For sure, the internet came. We have internet downloads and the possibility of doing this on website, but it's still a very manual process where you have to reorganize yourself within your organization to fulfill a specific update criteria. Then the 2010 years was all around Agile and CI/CD coming in, so it was much more automation and realizing what are all the dependencies of the tools and technologies you use within your portfolio day by day. And coming to now, it's much more around cloud and containers. So in the decade around 2010 and 20s, it was the early time of how to do orchestration of software containers. We didn't really have proper standards already around signings and all this process, but it got step by step in the common usage of software supply structures, and a lot of updates still needed to be released manually. And now, with all these massive growth of complexity, the whole, I would say, technology market realized, okay, this needs to be much more to do with automated updates. We have to have automated update and fully orchestrated software supply chain. So that's the current state where we, from the public sector side saying, okay, what does it mean in order of getting software into our portfolios? And if it comes to security part of this supply chain, there are many steps within those supply steps where an attacker can have sufficient focus on saying, okay, this could be a part of a supply chain attack where I can have a look and see if there's any chance to get into technology which is used to affect it in a way. So this is, I would say, from the security side, all these terms and questions where we need concepts and strategies how to deal with that. There's a very automated and very high-scaled infrastructure of supply and a lot of attacking points. With having the OpenCode curated catalog and the software development environment in place, we realized, okay, this is a sufficient infrastructure point for public sector where we can add value on that supply chain. We started thinking about the batch program. And the batch program is about having all these software source code and saying, okay, there's a lot of source analyzing tooling out there. We have the open source review toolkit. There's Trevi for container scanning. There's a public code YAML, which is a metadata format to exchange repository metadata. For sure, we have the GitLab, which we are using, and also there's DevGuard, which we're currently introducing in our OpenCode program. And the main problem we wanted to deal with was saying, okay, there's a growing complexity in these modern supply chains. This was a big step. Then saying, okay, there's the scaling problem of the way in the public administration how our security concepts are in place. So many of them are time and resource intensive, means like individual have to do case reviews according to the specific local criteria, use technology toolings, and bring a report out of that. So, and the amount of software we need to bring under those strategies grows day by day. And a third important one is transparency in the software evaluation comes now when it comes to procurement for public sector, specifically to legal procurement contract agreements. So as a public sector, I cannot really look into it and have a strategic doing this automatically. I need to have an agreement with the providers, and so security is still based a lot of contracting rules, even if a lot of technology is behind. So as this is growing step by step, we see a responsibility for state to proactively ensure this security and resilience. So in our terms of OpenCode, we said, okay, we need to have a systematic approach of prevention through automated risk transparency. Because if you know in advance a lot of your risk, you can start organizing yourself through prevention strategies. And the motivation was, okay, we as OpenCode on ZenDiS, our work is bringing open source solutions, sovereign solution into public sector. But many people in the public sector are technically not in that deep field on their way. They have a lot of other stuff what they're doing as of their service. And I need to make it as much easy as possible to procure specific software. So everything we know about quality and integrity and security needs to be translated in a very easily and sufficient way that I can decide this has a quality meaning. And what we also say, we are not reacting on security incidences. Our strategy is we start building prevention points for increasing in the supply chain the security and quality aspects. So for the batch program, in practice, it means we have an automated and continuous review of all the software within the repositories under defined criteria. We have an aspect which we currently discussions with the BSI in Germany. How can we bring this process into a certification rather having certifications for each product within the catalog? Our aim is saying we use technology instead of legal verification, so it's an extra, it's an add-on. We say we need a technology-only focus to bring it as an extra aspect to the legal verifications. We want to have as much risk transparency within the program. And the last, we want to visualize those results for everyone using those technologies. So that's by today where we came now. So we have the software catalog on OpenCode. And what you see on the right side are the very, I would say, placative batches, which have a lot of criteria and process behind coming up, coming as a batch to a software solution, in this case, OpenDesk, and saying, okay, under this criteria, we fulfilled already those batch levels in a way. The first, for us, important batch is the maintenance batch. And the idea around that is an actively used and maintained project has a higher quality. And for us, on the risk management side, I can say, okay, if maintenance is done generally, it is an criteria of saying this software has might be under this ruling be in a better shape than other toolings. So we came up with 3 levels of maintenance batch, which we're currently using. The first one is a lot about the amount of commits on the specific projects. And then for sure it's issue reaction time, so saying if an issue come up, how fast is the reaction on that. We have a second level, it's around the releases and how many release texts got created within a certain amount, and we have a third level which of maintenance where we say there's also a developer bus factor. So if it's only a project run by one person, that might be a problem, because if he, under whatever circumstances, might not be around anymore, I have a problem with my software. So these are criteria where we came up with and saying, okay, this helps saying a software might be in better shape and quality than another. Again, this is more our base question. It's not saying it's like 100% thing. It's more we increasing the level of quality definitions. The second batch is around reusing software. Because what we also, and our assumption in that case is a software, if a software in public sector is used by many different entities, it's a sign of higher quality and project organization. because our assumption is many instances working on a specific software technology needs a lot of effort on procurement, compliance, strategic, and all these questions that have to be already solved once, so that might be possible doing it a second and a third time as well. So this is also a quality point. And how we do that, we ask the public sector members in the IT departments to mark a software project within our catalog as something that they're using within their portfolio. So we ask the community, because having quality and security is also about having the community put in place. The third one for us, very important, is the open source badge. This is what I described in the beginning. Under the criteria open source we defined for public sector in Germany and the allow list, this project is using an open source license within the project that is on the allow list of OpenCode. So we circling somehow the legal aspects of using the software and reusing it by checking the license automatically on the specific code repository. And the third one, that's the more challenging one now, because now it's getting deeper into secure, into the software supply chain and security aspects. Some weeks ago, we launched the first 2 levels for a security badge on the OpenCode platform, which we will fulfill end of the year by security level 3 badge as well, where we're currently working on. And again, here in the base level, we say, okay, it's about, again, around issue reaction time, because issue reaction time is around maintenance, but also around security. And we talk specifically on branch protection, but also is there a security policy in place, which is within the OpenCode repository. And in the second level of security practices, it's around signing tags and how are code review processes in place. And these, again, are criteria helping developers saying, if you use these procedures, this will help increasing the quality and the integrity of your technology. So the general way how we came with the badge program was, in the beginning, questions like what can we build on, so what's currently there on technology, who is the target group in our case for public sector, which questions need the badges to answer, and are there any surrounding frameworks and conditions we need to consider. And we started with basic principles and assumptions within the program. One of the aspects I want to make a citation is the quality of the software is significantly influenced by the project organization. And this is a result of a work from Mark Ohm in a study on the comparison of the security on open source software and proprietary software, which he did 2023. And the case around that, okay, this has a high value on identifying quality and security. So this is one of the basic principles we work with in the OpenCode badge program. So we test on a meta level with always equal benchmarking for everyone. It's for everyone the same. And we don't evaluate the code itself. It's not like we're looking at the code and saying this is quality good or nice or good coding or not. It's more we need to have an automated and scalable approach. The second one, basic principle, is say only true and false results only. The reason for that is if you do a lot of offsetting and thresholds that have interference, it's much more difficult to deal with the results of those reports. We want to make it as simple as possible. So the criteria have a true and false meaning, and we collect them together and make it simple, build up a reporting on that. And our target audience is, again, not in the first place technically, in the second place it is, but in the first place not. So you need to have a simple result scheme. For sure, there's a lot of conception around, and many of you might be familiar with this. So we didn't invent all this stuff new. We work with what's there. So there are the OpenSSF scorecards. There's the IT Grundschutz in Germany from the BSI, and there are different studies like this one from Mark Ohm I just did a citation on. And we discussed those criteria and identified the parts of the criteria that can be automated and put into the software program. So what you saw before describes the specific labels for these batches. And I know it's a hard decision and also discussion. Okay, how many commits within which kind of period is a sufficient criteria? So, and where we now came from saying, okay, it's not easy saying, okay, there's one answer to that, because it also has to do about the technology, the specific projects that develop. We need to have a good threshold and entry point on that. And what we also did saying, okay, we look for thresholds for public sectors. That might not be sufficient in other sectors, but we start with the data and the commit frequencies we see on a high maintained project on OpenCode in terms of the projects within OpenCode. So we created the starting points for the thresholds out of the metadata of all the projects we have within the catalog. And for sure, we are able to increase and change it by time if we see the thresholds might change and the general quality gets increased step by step. And the next important step is how to get the batches out there and bring in to the people on the procurement side. So this is where the software index comes in place. In the software directory, you find on each of the projects that are within there these criteria and can identify that this is sufficient in this place. To give some current figures, it's a bit of a German-English mix, but I tried to translate it. On the left side, it's the reuse batch. So we have already around 14% on the softwares having in place on having a reuse batch. This is, again, it's community-driven. So we encourage now communities saying, okay, there is a software within the catalog. I really invite going to OpenCode and help creating those metadata for those batches and marking them as good to use. We have the maintenance batch, which is on a level of starting point for many of these projects, but half of the projects already are in the first step into it. Again, this means also for all these projects, they need to identify and adjust their own processes to this criteria. And for us, the very exciting part of that was when we launched the project, within days we had requests from developer communities saying, okay, what do we need to fulfill those criteria? So because it's normally not that complicated to adjust of those. So we see really, and I would say, coming operational process of standardization, which comes from the criteria and development side and not only by a standardization board. So there are many possibilities to use. If you can use the QR code, and there's a web page where you can throw in a GitLab repository, and then you get a detailed developer report for the state of this specific project. Just to give you a really short aspect, what does it look like? So we provide a scanning tool here for all of these repositories, and you get a result. And on each of these results, you get a criteria-based report if your project failed or passed. So this is now getting into the developer perspective of software development, saying, okay, what do I need to do, and what is the current state of my project? And it's continuous and ongoing. So if you fail after a while, you realize, have a red flag on that, and you can readjust. So, but their technology, we have a Serif API, and you can use it different ways to check against your project if you want to integrate it in your current development environment. On the roadmap is now the third part of the security patch. And so far, we worked mainly on metadata, which we get from the repositories, from the communities, or something which is in the specific project. To get into supply chain security aspects and criteria, we need to now look much more on what does the curation on the software development lifecycle means for the project. So we're currently working on having criteria around releases without critical vulnerabilities and offering a vulnerability management within OpenCode to identify the severe remission times. And what that means is we can create the SBOMs now on the repositories within the catalog, and offering with the DevGuard, which is an open source tool from an agency from Bonn in Germany, now a component within OpenCode where you can curate CVEs for a specific project. And this is a very important process step to mark and to fulfill criteria also for Cyber Resilience Act and anything which comes up. So it's a tool. It's part of the toolbox where we say, okay, if you distribute your solution through OpenCode, you get the toolings on hand, which you can use to fulfill those criteria. And we use the metadata on that to create those batches. This is currently in beta state. We work with with 2 or 3 projects now to bring it into production, and we will launch it by autumn this year. So the vision for us, having a certified procedural security, that would really be a step of significantly strengthen the digital sovereignty in the public sector. And this means all the toolboxes and strategies we use as OpenCode is in our terms a part in of a reorganization for supply chain security, where we say this is a new approach where the process itself gets, with all the results, gets looked into, but it needs to be transparent, scalable, and consist in all of these steps around. So with this in place, we now have the development environment, the software catalog. We started going into CVE monitoring and detection, but supply chain still is a lot and much more what you need for providing technology in cloud-based solutions. And this comes to the third strategic visions part, where we also wrote a strategic paper with the BSE in Germany. And I want to start again with the mission of providing open source technology like an open desk to public administration. That means we need technologies that can be used anywhere. And that means that is a cloud approach, and container technology are based on part of that. And when it comes to that, we need to raise a lot of questions around the supply chain for public sectors that we have to address to. The first one is around stability. So how reliable are these supply chains? And in other ways, what would happen if Docker Hub might not be available by chance in any way? And what would that mean for the technology we use to run the government? Also on security, so how secure is this? Can I look into it? Do I know what's happening within these supply chains? The third one is around, for sure, trust. Who created these containers or checked on these containers? And for us, what around the tools to working with all this metadata and with all this complexity? We showed with the batch program one tool step which we want to offer to that, but it's still a question of, okay, I have a solution like an open desk. It's 10,000 of dependencies. You can print an SBOM, but that does mean only something for the legal part, not for the security part. You have to work with old data, and you have to work and have a good monitoring on that. So there are multiple systemic risks working with cloud-based container toolings in public sector. It's around transparency and the reliability of this supply chain. We need to act in cases of incidences, so not just writing a newsletter or a press statement if an incident happens. We need to provide the specific metadata to the projects which running specific versions of dependencies with risk. We lose digital sovereignty when we lose the ability to look into the supply chains of this technology. It's not only about the products, it's also around the supply chains and the development environment. We don't have that much situational awareness, which we should have in 2025. Means we know there's a lot of open source all around there, but we don't know what kind of open source and which version is where within the whole public sector. It's something you only can address by a specific vendor and not for a whole market. The metadata is not concluded in public space. And it's a lack of scale. So again, this is one of the reasons we opened up this batch program, saying it should be full automated and only based on criteria that can be scaled. So that means building trust as public sector and going into steps now being a base image provider. We're currently starting a pilot with first hardening base images for public sector projects in Germany, where we say our aim is to provide a sufficient amount from base images through OpenCode for the whole sector and help by hardening that with the whole sector. Because when we do that and start that and make it public, we can increase the security level for the whole sector by 1. And that's, I think, an aspect where we need to bring our security aspects into. We need to create these container image supplying infrastructure as decentralized as possible. It's about the reliability. It's about hardening and ensuring those container safeties based on criteria, but also providing those hardened container infrastructure. We provide the tools and step-by-step bringing them around OpenCode on the platform. And this all around is a full ZenDiS software development lifecycle strategy where we say, if you look at software development life cycles, there needs to be sufficient infrastructure that addresses the vector aspects of supply chain with toolings, infrastructure, and policies, and helps increasing a transparent layer of security in open source. So technology-wise, this would mean we are now talking about building a secure build and development environment. The development environment is already there. Attestation through the whole supply chain, for sure, that's an important point. Registry, which we already started with in OpenCode. The criteria for this supply chain evidence and all around setting this infrastructure up as decentralized as possible. Because, and that's this overall assumption when we talk about sovereign and cloud-based toolings and tools like OpenDesk, it means also we need to have a long-term investment in the corresponding infrastructure and having this as much in place with open source technology as possible, because this is the baseline where we build up digital government in the future and can ensure that the criteria and values are in it that we need to ensure democratic work and governance. So thinking about digital sovereignty means in that case, we need to discuss this on a European and international scale. This is also architecture and infrastructure, and the work we do of OpenCode in our terms would be an offering saying, so this can be a part of a blueprint for a sovereign building block for Europe. Thanks a lot. So I think we have only 3 minutes left, so maybe 2 or 3 questions would be sufficient if possible. Yeah, please. I'm not sure if we have a mic here, so you maybe need to raise your voice, please. Yeah. You mean the signatures on the? You mean the signatures on the release tags? So that we identified on that. So it's part of the developer documentation you find online. What are the specific aspects we look at? So yeah, it should be transparent. And if you have any ideas of extend that or fulfill a more broader range, always please reach out and help bring those projects together. Yeah. Here, please. So the question is around if this could also hurt open source projects in a way, because how good can a project fulfill all of those criteria? And I think it's a very important question in case of discussing how open source comes in place and in the world. But in our terms of view, I would say we have in public sector roles saying, okay, how can we open up open source to the public sector? And this needs to ensure that a specific level of criteria are fulfilled. So it's more having a transparent entry point and helping reaching those entry points. So we would say if a software is not fulfilling those criteria, it won't be part of IT portfolios for public sector. I think it's sometimes hard to take, but it's the way how procurement works. So it's more having a transparent way of how can you entry on that. So I agree on that. It is a hard discussion, and we always need to discuss those criteria quite strong. But on the other side, for procurement, it's like we need to open those criteria and make them as a standard. Yeah.
You're mentioning that OpenCode is like the blueprint for Europe, and you're creating some criteria in Germany. There are similar initiatives in France, Norway, Sweden, everywhere, and in the European Union.
Yes.
How are you, collaborating with these? Are these going to be German badges, or are they going to be European badges?
Yeah. So first, in our discussions, we are very aware of the specific and different approaches on that, and we try to consider them as much as possible. So also we are in exchange with ZenDiS on collaborating on OpenDesk with France and Netherlands, and also these would be part of this cooperation. So it's not something where we say, oh, this is just a German approach. It's more we try to bring it in a really open source solution that can be used, and we are very happy for cooperation and contribution on that, and extend it now step by steps to sufficient other programs. It's right now, it's only for Germany. There is a European catalog where we already get integrated with the German catalog, and we are aware of the different approaches in other countries right now. I'm in contact with half a dozen European countries right now. They bring up their programs and talking about how can we synchronize those things. I will be here. I think our time is up because it's 12 already. Thanks for joining, and I'm happy staying here around and getting in touch with you afterwards. Thanks a lot.